My mother looked at my wedding invitation, laughed in my face, and called it a pathetic little event. Then she folded the card in half, tossed it onto the kitchen counter, and said, "I suppose this is what happens when people settle." 3 months later, she walked into my wedding reception, saw who I had married, and nearly collapsed. Because the man she had spent years mocking wasn't who she thought he was. And neither was I. My name is Caroline Brooks. I was 31 years old, worked as a middle school teacher, and had spent most of my life trying to earn my mother's approval. My mother, Diane, had one obsession. Appearances. Everything had to look perfect. The right neighborhood. The right friends. The right schools. The right image. Growing up, I learned that love in our household often came with conditions. When I got accepted into a state university instead of an Ivy League school, Mom sighed and said, "Well, not everyone can be exceptional." When I bought my first used car, she asked if I was embarrassed. When my younger sister, Natalie, married a successful attorney in a lavish ceremony attended by nearly 400 guests, Mom described it as the happiest day of my life. I stood beside Natalie as her maid of honor and smiled through the ache in my chest. A year later, I met Ethan. He wasn't flashy. He worked as a maintenance technician at a local hospital. He wore simple clothes. Drove a 10-year-old truck. And somehow, he made me feel more loved in 6 months than I had felt in decades. He remembered how I took my coffee. He brought soup when I was sick. He listened. Really listened. One evening, we sat on his apartment balcony watching the sunset. "I know I'm not exactly what your mother imagined," he said carefully. I squeezed his hand. "You're exactly what I imagined." When Ethan proposed, I cried before he even finished asking. I said yes immediately. Telling my mother was another story. She stared at me across the dining room table. "A maintenance technician?" "Yes." "You mean a janitor?" My jaw tightened. "He works in hospital operations." Mom laughed. "Oh, Caroline. What does that mean?" She crossed her arms. "You've always had such low expectations for yourself." The humiliation hit like a slap. "Dad was a mechanic," I reminded her. "And I worked very hard to move beyond that life," she snapped. I left before I said something I'd regret. When Ethan and I started planning our wedding, we chose something small. A beautiful botanical garden. Close friends. Immediate family. No debt. No extravagance. Just love. Mom was horrified. "This isn't a wedding," she said during one planning meeting. "It's a backyard barbecue with flowers." I swallowed hard. "It's what we want." Natalie chimed in. "Maybe Mom just wants you to have something special." I looked at my sister. "It is special." Mom rolled her eyes. "You're making a mistake." Then she picked up our invitation. "Reception to follow under the conservatory." She snorted. "Pathetic little event." I felt tears sting my eyes. Ethan placed his hand over mine. "We're happy," he said calmly. Mom stood. "You'll regret settling." That word haunted me. Settling. As though choosing kindness over status was failure. As the wedding approached, Mom became increasingly cruel. She criticized my dress. Complained about the guest list. Questioned Ethan's ability to support me. Then came twist number 1. 2 weeks before the wedding, Natalie showed up at my apartment crying. "I need to tell you something." Apparently, her husband, Richard, the successful attorney Mom adored, had been hiding massive gambling debts. Their marriage was falling apart. He had been unfaithful. The perfect life Mom worshipped had been built on lies. Natalie looked devastated. "Mom still thinks everything's fine." I hugged my sister. For the first time, I realized how much pressure she'd been carrying. Even being the favorite came at a cost. The wedding day arrived. The botanical garden looked magical. Soft lights glowed beneath the conservatory ceiling. Fresh flowers lined the aisle. Friends laughed nearby. I had never felt more certain about anything. Until Mom arrived. She stepped out of her car, looked around, and frowned. Oh. I inhaled slowly. What? It's smaller than I expected. I closed my eyes briefly. Even now. Then came twist number 2. As guests settled into their seats, a sleek black SUV pulled into the parking lot. Several people stepped out. Hospital executives. Board members. Doctors. Mom blinked. Who are they? I shrugged. Ethan's guests. Confusion crossed her face. The ceremony began. As I walked down the aisle toward Ethan, nothing else mattered. His eyes filled with tears. You look beautiful, he whispered. So do you, I replied. People laughed softly. The vows were simple. Honest. Real. When we kissed, applause erupted beneath the conservatory. For the first time in years, I felt completely seen. Then came the reception. Mom cornered me near the dessert table. I still don't understand. What? Why all those hospital executives are here? Before I could answer, the hospital's chief executive officer approached Ethan. Congratulations, he said warmly. We're lucky to have you. Mom stared. You know the CEO? The man smiled. Ethan practically saved our entire hospital system. What? The CEO explained that Ethan wasn't simply maintaining equipment. Over several years, he had developed innovative systems that dramatically improved emergency response efficiency. He had quietly helped redesign safety protocols adopted by multiple facilities. Several patents were pending. He had recently been appointed Director of Operations Improvement. Mom looked stunned. You never told us. Ethan smiled gently. You never asked. The silence that followed felt deafening. Then came twist number 3. Later that evening, Natalie received a phone call. Richard had been arrested. The gambling debts. Fraud allegations. Everything had finally surfaced. Natalie broke down crying. Mom rushed toward her. My poor baby. For the first time in my life, I interrupted. Natalie needs support. Mom looked confused. I continued. Not judgment. Something shifted in Natalie's expression. You know, she said softly, I envied you. What? You married someone who loves you. Her voice cracked. I married someone Mom approved of. Mom stood frozen. The truth settled heavily across the room. Years of comparisons. Pressure. Conditional affection. None of it had protected either daughter from pain. One daughter had chased approval. The other had chosen authenticity. Only one of us had found peace. Near the end of the reception, Mom approached Ethan privately. I owe you an apology. Ethan looked surprised. I judged you unfairly. He hesitated. You judged Caroline unfairly too. Mom's eyes filled with tears. I know. That conversation didn't erase decades of hurt. Healing rarely works that way. But it mattered. As the evening ended, Ethan and I danced beneath strings of white lights. I rested my head against his shoulder. You okay? He asked. I smiled. More than okay. Mom watched from across the room. Later, she approached me one final time. I wanted more for you. I looked directly at her. You wanted different. She blinked. I continued. I don't need a bigger wedding. I don't need a richer husband. I don't need strangers admiring my life. Tears welled in her eyes. I need this. I glanced toward Ethan. Toward our friends laughing nearby. Toward the simple celebration she'd once mocked. I need someone who chooses me every day. Months later, Mom visited our home. A modest house filled with warmth. Ethan cooked dinner while I graded papers. She sat quietly at our kitchen table. "You seem happy," she admitted. "I am." She looked around. "Maybe I spent too much time worrying about appearances." I smiled sadly. "Maybe." She nodded. "I'm trying to learn." The relationship between us wasn't magically repaired. Some wounds require time. Others leave scars permanently. But progress happened in small moments. Unexpected phone calls. Honest conversations. Less criticism. More curiosity. 1 year later, Ethan and I celebrated our anniversary beneath that same conservatory. As we exchanged gifts, he handed me a framed photograph from our wedding day. In the picture, we weren't posing. We were laughing. Completely unaware of the camera. Completely ourselves. I realized then that my mother had been wrong about one thing. I hadn't settled. I had selected carefully. I had chosen respect. Loyalty. Partnership. Love. The woman who once called my wedding a pathetic little event had measured life through appearances. But appearances can lie. Perfect marriages collapse. Impressive titles disappoint. Expensive weddings fade into memory. What lasts is character. What lasts is kindness. What lasts is finding someone who sees your worth long before the rest of the world catches up. My mother panicked when she realized who I married. Not because Ethan became impressive by her standards, but because she finally understood something she'd spent years refusing to see. The daughter she'd pitted had built the very life she had been searching for all along. And there is nothing pathetic about that.